Hi, this week I want to talk about a passage that's really shaped the way I think about the love of God. I suspect that I'm not alone as a preacher on this, but I have had times where I've been preparing a sermon on a particular passage and it begins to hit me in a way that I hadn't expected it to. And so, whatever it may have meant for somebody else, it has had a huge impact on me and how I think. One of those passages that really sticks out to me is when I was preparing a sermon on the woman at the well in John chapter 4. Now, there's an awful lot going on in this passage, and there's a bunch of topics that it touches on, either directly or indirectly, that we could mention, but the one I want to highlight is the frankly rude things that Jesus has to say to this woman on the topic of her marital status. Now, the traditional reading of this passage is that this woman has a history of sexual infidelity. But however, I have been reading other interpretations that suggest that it's possible that she's had several husbands who have died for various reasons, and the one that she's with now might not be her husband in some senses for some very good reasons. Now, I'm not going to take a real hard stance one way or the other on that particular topic, because while it is true that the reflections I have to share perhaps are stronger if this woman has a history of noteworthy sin, they are certainly not nullified if that she simply has a life that's shaped by severe loss and grief. So Jesus and this Samaritan woman have a drink at the well and have a conversation, and it touches on things like Jew-Gentile relationships. It has to do with the role of worship and how we do that. It has to do also with the different weight that we put on different traditions, and then it finally touches on the Messiah that God is sending. Now, eventually, Jesus tells this woman that she should go and get her husband and then come back to him. And she says that she doesn't have his husband. And now Jesus then responds almost flippantly and says, you are right when you say you have no husband, for you've had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. You've spoken truly. Now, again, the traditional interpretation implies that she has had a series of divorces, that she's been unfaithful in various ways. But even if she's just lost several husbands, you can imagine how this bringing up of this sore point would be very difficult for her and might make her a little bit apprehensive as to what Jesus is about. Now, the conversation goes on a little bit longer, with Jesus referring to himself as the Messiah who is to come. And eventually, the woman goes back to her town. Now, the amazing thing to me is not that she told the people in the town about Jesus, but how she told them about Jesus. Her message to them was, come and see a man who told me all the things I've ever done. He can't be the Messiah, can he? I must admit that here, the fact that she says, come see the man who told me everything I've ever done, rather than come see the man who told me everything that ever happened to me, makes me think that perhaps the traditional interpretation may not be totally out of line. In any case, regardless of whether what Jesus knew about this woman was either her history of sin or else her incredibly painful past, it is an interesting way to go about telling people about Jesus. I mean, if you were to go out and tell people about Jesus, would you start by sharing with them that this is the guy who knew all the sinful or the shameful or the painful things in your past? I don't know if I would do that. In most of the time in my life, I have not seen people taking that kind of approach when telling people about Jesus. When I was preparing a sermon on this passage years ago, the question of why would she do this just wouldn't leave me alone. I just couldn't understand why that would be good news for her. Because even if Jesus wasn't wrong with what he said, I can't understand why she would welcome it, why that would be the sign that he could be the Messiah. This is what I realized. And while I would never be so naive as to say it's the only thing going on, I think it's an important observation. When Jesus says that he knows her whole history and her whole past, one of the things that that's doing is communicating to her that there is nothing in her past that can be hidden from him, that he knows everything that she's ever done. But why is that good news? It's good news because if this woman did not understand how much Jesus knew, she could always dismiss any kind of claim to love or grace or mercy by saying, he doesn't really know me. If he really knew the real me and what I've done or what I've been through, he would never, ever say these things to me. By acknowledging to her that he already knows all this, that nothing in her past could possibly be a surprise to her, he's really making a strong statement to her about the unconditionality of grace. Now, we human beings keep secrets. It might be because we're ashamed of something, it may be something else, but all of us keep some things from the prying eyes of the public. It might be something that nobody else knows. It might be something that even you yourself have managed to repress so you don't even think about it. The point is that even in those situations, all of those secrets that we guard, God knows them all. Now, sometimes the fact that God knows all of your secrets is used in kind of a sinister way. And this idea that maybe you're not as good as you think you are. And maybe there's a place for that somewhere in the church, although it's almost certainly not when someone is already feeling crushed by shame of their past. The truth is that to me, this is one of the greatest and most liberating things to hear. Because if God really does know all of my deepest and darkest secrets, it means that the promises of grace are not conditioned on me being better than I am, me being as good as I want to think that I'd like to be. So maybe it is that I should try to be better, and maybe I will try to do that, but that all has to come later. It has to come after I've received the grace and the promise of grace, because in the Bible, every command to change, every call to be renewed, every chance to turn our lives around is based on the assumption that you have heard the call of God, that you've received it, and that you're living your life by grace and not by your works. So I don't know what you may be hiding, what you may be ashamed of, but God already knows it and loves you anyway. There may come a time for further transformation. And in fact, there will come a time for further transformation, but it will always come after grace and never, ever before it. Come and see the one who can tell you everything that you've ever done, because he can tell you who you are, and you can trust him because he knows what he's talking about. Well, that's all for this week. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to take up, please send me an email at pastorstevik@gmail.com. If you have found these videos to be interesting or helpful in some way, please consider liking and sharing them on the various social media platforms. If you'd like to subscribe to the YouTube channel where these videos are posted, it's at youtube.com/tstevik1. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.